Dragons, powers, friendship, smut. The four elements of any book worth reading. And the book we're talking about today has all four. I'm talking about Fourth Wing. Hey there, I'm Carrie the Snail, and I read books. What do I read? Well, today I'm reading some romantasy. This book just exploded on the scene, dropping very recently in April 2023, and then becoming a #1 bestseller only a couple months later in June, which is pretty impressive. As another strong entry into the romantasy genre, a book like this might tend to be just regarded as for the ladies. But that's some trash, brother. So I wanted to read it for myself and share with you my thoughts as some guy, as some dude. I've been surprised before when I read a book like ACOTAR, so I am just chasing that feeling. For those of you who haven't read it yet but need some convincing to do so, I'm first going to talk about the general plot, the characters, the vibes. Then we're going to move over to a spoiler section so we can spill some of that dragon tea. We're going to talk about the character development, some insane plot points, and most importantly, the spicy scenes. And make sure you'll read this book so you can get to that section. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna have after party energy. You're not gonna wanna miss it. So be sure to strap into your dragon harness, like the video, because we're talking about Fourth Wing. Here we go. For the author of this book, Rebecca Yarros, this isn't her first dragon rodeo. In fact, she's written quite a few romance novels, but more in the genre of romance, even some military romance as well. A lot of her books seem to be pretty highly rated on Goodreads as well. But this is her first real foray into the fantasy genre. So I guess it's actually is her first dragon rodeo. There are two things about her personal life that I think might be important to mention because it has a pretty big influence on this book. One, she's married to a military man, so she definitely has a good understanding of military structure, training, combat. And two, she has a close relationship with physical disabilities. She herself has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a skin condition, but also she has an adopted daughter who is nonverbal and on the autism spectrum. Both of these details definitely have influence in this book, due to the fact that the main character has a sort of physical disability and that she is entering as a cadet into this dragon rider program. The plot follows Violet Sorrengail, who is daughter of Commanding General Sorrengail, her mom. She was initially training to be a scribe because her small frame would have been a challenge for her if she were to become a dragon rider. But military mom is like, nope, you're going to military school so you can learn how to ride dragons. Suck it up. Ride or die, Violet. At the War College of Basgiath, Violet has a sort of target on her back. Because her mom was responsible for smacking down a bunch of rebels in a previous uprising, turns out a lot of their kiddos are here training at school too, and they hate her guts. A kind of similar setup to Harry Potter, but still unique. Her mom was responsible for creating a lot of enemies, so naturally, these cadets are channeling their anger at her daughter. There is, however, one person that's channeling more hate than the others, and that's Xaden Ryerson. Xaden's dad, Fen Ryerson, was kind of the leader of this uprising, so they got smacked down the hardest. I love this name, Xaden. It sounds like he's supposed to be in the finals for like the X Games or something. Yo, what up? The name's Xaden. People call me Zaid for short. You know, the way that they say that I'm flying on my board is almost like I'm riding a dragon, you could say. It's kind of weird that they say that, but you know, it's pretty cool. You see, for Xaden, it's as if Violet's mother tried to permanently disqualify him from the X Games, and so now he is filled with rage that her daughter is trying to join the X Games. The dynamic is a little confusing, so I thought I'd just break it down for you in simpler terms. Basgiath War College is ruthless. Every day is quite literally a life or death scenario, either potentially falling victim to the endless dangers of dragon riding or each other. Yes, that's right, killing other students to get ahead is allowed. They're put through the most grueling and difficult training because being a dragon rider requires the most capable, brutal, and cutthroat people. You see, dragons can form a special bond with their riders. Not only does it give them a telepathy between the two, but also magical powers that they channel through the dragon. And with a bond this strong, dragons don't want to be paired with weak fools. Get good, brother. While the setting is very ripe with potential, there are definitely some aspects about the writing that I really like and some that I do not like at all. The first thing I'll say is that the writing can feel pretty juvenile, pretty high school at times, which is kind of jarring because the beginning can almost feel like a young adult novel at times. You know, characters are cussing a lot, trying to be edgy. But then later on, some of these characters are getting real heavy in the sheets. There is even a point when one of Violet's enemies unironically says, "You're dead!" What? Why are we still writing this kind of dialogue? We really should be done with using that line by now. That line of dialogue needs to be banned. It is so overused and unimaginative. Unfortunately, there are many instances of this, so I'd say that the writing and dialogue can be pretty pretty weak and often tactless at times. Another issue that I had that might be a little bit more of a personal preference though, is that Yaros is pretty nondescript when it comes to the fantasy aspects of her world. I think you can kind of feel that the fantasy world is like not really the main focus, it's kind of more of a backdrop. If I were to describe to you the sort of setting of this world, it is quite literally fantasy and with dragons. That's literally it. She does a pretty decent job at building the things within the world, the idea that you can bond with your dragons, have powers, but beyond that, anything discernible or memorable about this world is pretty non-existent. Again, dragons are a main focus of this book, and literally the full extent in which she describes these dragons is by their color and the shape of their tail. That is all. A red dragon with a sword tail. Come on, why not give us more than that? I think about reading a fantasy world like this. You're in the passenger seat of a car. The author is the driver, and they take you in any direction they choose, while you get to look out at the window at the scenery, anticipate the road ahead or what's coming around the corner, taking in the environment and enjoying the twists and turns. If I were to plug Fourthwing into that analogy, it felt like we were driving in a dense fog, and the only things that I had clear detail of is what was immediately around me. There's a very practical and no-frills feel to her writing. Again, this might just be more of a personal preference thing. Some people might like to imagine the scenes themselves. It just became clear to me at a certain point that the focus is mainly on the characters and not so much the world around them, as opposed to a book like ACOTAR, which I feel is firstly a fantasy novel with romance elements injected in. What I did really enjoy about the writing, though, is the interplay between the characters and their dragons. I won't say too much right now, but the bonds that these characters make with their dragons are definitely some of the most enjoyable parts that I had, and actually had me laughing out loud a few times, due to its humor and charm. Another thing that I really liked about her writing is that her prose are very visceral. Now, if you've been following me, you know that I haven't read like a ton of fantasy recently, but I'll be honest, this has some of the best fight scenes I've definitely read in a long time, especially compared to a fantasy series like ACOTAR. She really knows how to describe movement, force, and impact. When Violet's sparring with her peers, I can vividly see the momentum. This is one area where Yaros is perfectly descriptive. The way Violet's dodging attacks, countering. This is not something that's just over in a second. There's definitely an exchange happening here. Yaros definitely writes some good fight scenes and choreography, even for a book like A Court of Wings and Ruin, which has this huge war and a big anticipated fight between two characters. That fight scene is kind of anticlimactic because it just ends in a couple pages. It's clear that some fantasy authors know how to build a fantasy world and set up grand battles, but don't necessarily know how to write a fight scene. It definitely is its own kind of art, and I think this is an area where Yaros really excels. And this was pretty consistent throughout the book, leading up to a high-intensity scene at the end. It definitely does make me wonder if there is a parallel between writing fight scenes and spice scenes. They definitely do have a lot of parallels. They're physical, they're carnal, there's an ebb and flow to them, there's momentum, there's tension and release. And so all that to say, there are aspects about this book that I really enjoyed and some that I didn't. And so in that way, it kind of brings me right in the middle. The fantasy world is kind of vague, but the dragon and magic systems are pretty cool. The banter between the main characters and the dragons are fun, but it's also plagued with a lot of goofy writing sometimes. Do not be mistaken though, this is not a young adult novel, okay? There are some spice scenes in here that'll singe your eyebrows right off, all right? So be careful. If you're already really into romantasy, I think this is definitely a book worth checking out. But its style might not mesh with everybody. In fact, it seems kind of polarizing at times. I've heard a lot of people say that they absolutely love this book, and also a lot of people that say that they hated this book. So it might be one of those that just either meshes with you or it doesn't. Well, I don't think I can necessarily say that this will be like a favorite book of mine. I actually had some moments after reading the books, like weeks later, where I kind of missed reading it. I kept thinking about the characters and just the feel of the story. It was pretty infectious, and there's definitely something to be said about that. Okay, so now we're gonna get into some spoilers. So if you feel like you're interested in reading this book, feel free to go read it, but hey, come back, okay? Because it's gonna be like a freaking after party in here, okay? It's gonna be nuts, it's gonna be crazy. We'll be waiting right here when you're done, okay? We'll have our dragon arms open for you, ready to embrace you when the time comes. Okay, bye-bye now. Run along, read some books. Hey, are they all gone? Yeah, I think so. Okay, good. Yo, wasn't that dragon sex crazy? Dragon sex. I don't think the idea of dragon sex has ever crossed my mind, ever. I thought they were strictly egg-laying creatures, like a chicken. But this book makes you think, okay? Makes you consider the most valuable questions in life. And a book that can make you do that, it's important. Now, the next important thing we need to talk about, second only to dragon sex, of course, is character development. Let's start with Violet. Violet has her arc framed for her pretty well in the beginning. She wanted to train to become a scribe, but then is forced to become a cadet for dragon riding. People at school hate her because she's her mother's daughter, and she doesn't have a body type fit for the kind of training that she's gonna embark on. It said that she was sick at a young age, which I think stunted her growth, contributing to her having a smaller and weaker frame. So a big part of her arc is trying to endure this training with a sort of disability. Now, I don't have a physical disability myself, so there's only so much that I can say about this that carries much weight, but I'm just a little torn about the way that Violet's physical disability plays out in the story. First of all, the nature of her disability is pretty general and vague, and mainly amounts to her just being generally weaker and smaller than most of the other characters. Part of me wishes that the nature of her disability was something a little bit more distinct and identifiable, so that way it would have more impact. Like if she had a hearing impairment or had maybe lost an arm or something, her obstacles would be clear cut in front of her, and the way that she would triumph over them would be very effective. When it's general, I think it has just a little bit less impact. However, it could very well be that the nature of her disability is general so that more people could relate to it on some level, regardless of what it is. It still comes across that Dain is just overly protective and not at all confident in her abilities. Whatever she does have, the point is that Dain, while caring for her, also doesn't have a lot of faith or confidence in her ability to excel, and so keeps trying to protect her, but also limiting her. So at the end of the day, I think this still worked, but again, this is coming from somebody who can't relate in the same way. I would genuinely love to hear from anybody in the comments who may have a disability and share what your thoughts were about this character and if you resonated with Violet or not. I also think this part of her story fits in a cool way with the dragons that she's bonded to. I thought for a while that maybe she was just gonna bond to Andarna, the gold dragon that's younger, smaller, and pretty inexperienced compared to the other dragons. But she also bonds with Tairn as well, one of the strongest dragons. I liked this because maybe in a way you could say that these two dragons represent two fundamental parts of Violet. She is considered weaker, inexperienced, kind of like Andarna, but she also clearly demonstrates strength, intelligence, and resilience. And so that part of her that might not be immediately visible is represented in Tairn. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. And their relationships together are hilarious and definitely one of my favorite aspects of the book. You get Andarna, who's pretty much a child and is just excited to be here. And then you got Tairn, who's just kind of like a jaded and malaise guy. He's like, yeah, I guess I'll bond with you. Their banter together, the way that Tairn would chuff at Violet, was just hilarious. Honestly, it made me laugh out loud multiple times. I wish their relationships took a little bit more prominence in the book, but shifts over to another guy we call Zaidman. I actually like Xaden quite a bit. He's definitely a no BS kind of guy. Has a menacing scar, of course, but he's got a lot of interesting aspects about him that pull him in different directions. And it made him out to be pretty mysterious. It felt like he wasn't as clear-cut of a cliche as he definitely could have been. He's supposed to be the person who hates Violet the most, but he doesn't really try to kill her. In fact, he avoids opportunities to assassinate her and instead, kind of helps her. At least at the beginning, he doesn't really show any sort of signs of being interested in Violet at all. I know later on that changes, but I appreciate that he's not one of those characters who's supposed to hate the main character, but all of their actions say otherwise. It's kind of like the people who say oh no, I'm just not into dating, but they flirt with literally everybody they come in contact with. I know Zaid kinda does this, but it's definitely a little bit more balanced and made more sense than other characters I've seen. There were many points in this book when I was like, oh, Xaden hates her. He hates her. And honestly, maybe he did for a little while, because he's actually trying to keep her alive to be captured. We don't know the circumstances, but we're still getting a case of falling in love with the kidnappee. Whoops. Zaid, my man, I know you're ripping some crazy 360 varials, but you can't be falling in love with the girl whose mom is trying to get you kicked out of the X Games. This has to be an early 2000s movie, right? It's gotta exist somewhere, right? As far as the plot goes, it's pretty well paced, sprinkling in tons of thrills and action, culminating into a pretty explosive ending followed by a sharp cliffhanger. The bulk of the plot is mainly focused on Violet trying to survive these intense trainings, navigating her new bond with two dragons, and also just trying to figure out what the frick Xaden's deal is. Now, this stretch of the plot is pretty enjoyable, but in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, what is this building towards? Where are we arriving? What is the overarching conflict or threat that is going to kick this plot into gear? To use Harry Potter as an example, the Sorcerer's Stone hints at a villain from the get-go. Voldemort, a direct threat to Harry's life, is out there doing shady stuff in the background. Meanwhile, when Harry goes to Hogwarts, he thinks Professor Snape has close ties with Voldemort. So in the day-to-day at Hogwarts, Harry thinks his life is in danger because of Professor Snape. This is a brilliant way to layer threats or adversaries in a book. There's the immediate threat here at school with Professor Snape. And then with Voldemort, there is the larger threat that's happening outside of the school walls. I bring this up because Fourth Wing has a similar sort of plot structure, and while there's the day-to-day threat for Violet, just trying to survive this school, I was really anticipating that overarching threat or conflict that would suddenly give the main character and plot a sort of larger context that we can get excited for. Something that's gonna grab you by the Dragon Balls and really take it to the next level. There's the twist at the end where we find out that Xaden is really just trying to hand Violet off to a group of people. We don't know who they are yet, so it's a mystery. And this is interesting, but again, without that larger context, we don't know why. We don't know what the purpose is. And then in the last 100 pages, because everything really seems to kick up a notch in the last 100 pages, we're introduced to the idea of venin and wyverns. Wyverns, I don't know, whatever. And I loved this concept. This was the looming conflict to the plot that I needed. I don't know if this concept of venin and wyverns has been done before, but it seemed pretty unique to me. Dragon riders create bonds with their dragons, which allows them to channel magical power that originates from the dragon. The venin and wyverns are the complete opposite. Venin abuse the natural order and forcibly tear magic out of the land, and then channel that power into an abomination of a flying beast known as a wyvern. A terrible, monstrous, dragon-like creature. They are quite literally the anti-dragon rider, which I thought was a pretty brilliant way of creating adversaries. It's a simple move, yet makes total sense in this world. The venin and wyverns are great matches for these cutthroat dragon riders. The venin's power is so immense that really the only way that you can kill them is by knife to the heart. And this makes the stakes even higher when encountering them. It puts all of that knife fight training to good use. I was definitely perplexed for a while. I was like, we're gonna be fighting against other dragons, griffins, but why are we training with knives? Even though Vi has 2 dragons, lightning powers, and even the power to stop time itself, the venin are still a major threat because they're not gonna die unless you stab them in the heart. I was definitely worried for a bit if Vi would be way too OP, but this I think levels things out a bit. The feeling that I had when I was reading this book was like, yeah, this is cool, this is solid, but it wasn't until this point that it really gripped me by the Dragon Balls, It's cool stuff. Out of all 4 of the strongest pillars that any good work of fiction should have, the strongest pillar, the crucial foundation in which this work is meticulously built upon, the pillar that holds the entirety of the literary work upon its back like Atlas himself, is the smut. What else? Before my lips could even fart out any words about such a thing, I have to physically prepare myself for the subject matter that I'm going to talk about. So naturally, I need to eat some hot sauce. Today we are trying a previous top-tier sauce in the Hot Ones lineup, and that is Da Bomb. I actually spilled a little drop on the floor over there when I was filming that, and is starting to burn a hole in my hardwood flooring. This is for you, Sean Evans. Oh, that tastes good. Oh, immediate neck sweats. Oh, that's fast. Oh my gosh. Oh, it hits you in the throat and the neck. It's like we're sparring and I just got kicked right in the neck right there. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Oh, this is immediate. This is what it must feel like for dragons when they're breathing fire. Oh my gosh. Okay, first thing I gotta address is Violet's thirst levels. Her thirst levels are off the charts. And so are mine. Oh my gosh. Wow, that one is so... It's like I opened my mouth and a dragon just blasted fire right down my throat. Anytime Xaden is just vaguely near the area, Violet is undone. Oh my gosh, my esophagus, it's like burning. It is burning. This is worse than the other one. This is actually worse than the other one. Oh, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I just love how after the threshing, when she finds out that this guy is like her mortal enemy, a danger to her life, she's like, oh, would you look at this? I need a piece of that in my life. Ka-chow! Ah! Oh my gosh. In the face of all possible dangers, she needs X Games aid. Now, I'm not trying to dog on her though. I'm not trying to yuck her yum. Men lust after women all the time. That doesn't mean that ladies don't experience the same thing. I mean, just don't be like a psychopath about it. Just sometimes people just gotta, they just make you ka-chow. What can I say? That's all there is to it. I do love how shameless she is about it though. The minute Zayd steps in, she's just like, oh, I'm gonna need you to kickflip on right on over here. You can nose grind on my rail, if you know what I mean. You can front side heel flip all over my front side. You can 360 shove it, under flip, no comply, but I will comply. Oh, this one actually feels like fire. It actually feels like fire straight out of the dragon's mouth. No, when that sexual tension really starts cranking, it's when Xaden and Vi start sparring. He's obviously really skilled. Disarms her completely and just throws her to the ground. I feel it in my belly. It feels like I just swallowed something molten. Instead of going for my arms, he twists, grabbing a hold of the backs of my thighs. Uh-oh. So I lose leverage and our bodies careen into a roll. He comes out on top. Of course he does. It quickly becomes clear that she's super into this. He seizes my wrist and pins it above my head. He rushes up to my neck. The flames lick my cheeks as he lowers his face so that his lips are only inches away from mine. I can make out every speck of gold in his onyx eyes, every bump and ridge of his scar. He lowers his face so his lips are only inches away from mine. My breath catches and my body warms. You are not attracted to toxic men, I reminded myself, and yet here I am, getting all attracted. Hey, we are all into some toxicity, aren't we? It doesn't stop there, though. The fight gets more intimate, we could say. You're tiny, he says, like an insult. Well aware, my eyes narrowed. So stop going for moves that expose you. He drags the tip of his dagger down to my side. A rib shot would have worked just fine. Then he guides our hand around his back, making himself vulnerable. Kidneys are a good fit from this angle, too. I swallow, refusing to think of other things that are a good fit at this angle. Vi, chill. The best part is, though, is that like everybody's standing around the mat and watching this all happen. The ease with which he has me on my back is simultaneously appalling and ridiculously hot, especially with the weight of his hips settled between my thighs, well aware that he's done it all without knocking the wind out of me. So start disarming me. Unless you don't know how to handle an opponent on top of you. That's a whole other issue. This is a prime example where it feels like there are some similarities in the way that fight scenes play out and the way that spice scenes play out. Arms are flailing everywhere, bodies getting slammed into the floor, people getting hurt, routine stuff. So Vi is getting the hots for Zayd so bad that she wants to climb him like a tree. Yes, a tree. So this is when Vi is attacked in her sleep and Zayd leads her out of the castle to safety. Listen to this. Keep talking loud enough for those others to hear, and someone will stop us before we get anywhere. Can't you just hide us in the shadows or something? Sure, because a giant black cloud moving down the hallway isn't going to look more suspicious than a couple sneaking around. He shoots me a look and keeps me from countering. Point taken. Not that we're a couple. Not that I wouldn't climb the man like a tree if presented with the right set of circumstances. She wants to climb him like a tree, to grab a branch, hoist yourself up, sit up there, look out, maybe fashion a rope swing. Are women thinking about this? The tree scenario? I ain't trying to yuck your yum or anything. I'm genuinely curious. So the guys who are watching, maybe, you just need to take some notes here from Zayd. Strike a T-pose. Let those branch-like arms stretch gracefully into the sky. And don't ever move. So Vi is clearly into Zayd. Who wouldn't be? Meanwhile, Zayd is doing a great job at not caring at all. He's clearly more worried about, the upcoming X Games than girls. Can we turn this into an early 2000s movie, please? But then, one day, Vi is just doing her thing, no big deal. And then she's hit with an overwhelming power that just consumes her. A force so undeniably primal, like climbing a tree. She gains the power of dragon horniness. She's running around the castle like a madwoman with the need to bing bong. What's going on? What's happening to her? Let me break it down for you. Remember the dragon sex we talked about earlier? Vi is bonded with Tairn, so they share each other's thoughts and emotions. Same thing with Zayd and his dragon, Sgaeyl? I don't freaking know. But Tairn and Sgaeyl are mates. They're partners, which means that Zayd and Vi are now connected into this interweb. They can read each other's minds now. So when Tairn and Sgaeyl are participating in some dragon leapfrog, Vi and Zayd are lit aflame with that residual frog leaping energy. This is an absolutely hilarious scenario. It is so over the top, yet fits completely with the way that this world works, I absolutely love it. This is something really special that I cannot imagine any other author creating. I cannot imagine anybody else has conceived of such a thing except for Rebecca Yarros in writing this book. This is truly where fantasy and romance are bonded together in an unholy union. Vi runs out of the castle. She's looking around, spots Zaid leaned up against the castle wall like a delinquent. Vi and Zaid are dangerously close to doing something that they're gonna regret. They're making out hard. But after a few minutes of trying to restrain themselves, they can't take it any longer. And then Vi finds those glorious circumstances in which she can climb him like a tree. But then Zaid, accessing a monumental amount of resistance and mental fortitude, he restrains himself and keeps him from doing anything further. Even with the dragon horniness deteriorating his willpower, they separate. But not for long. The willpower in the tank is low. They're running on fumes. And when their defenses are completely destroyed, they go after each other like a couple of rabid animals. Because I only want you, Xaden. The words breach something within him, and he gives. Finally, our mouths collide, and the kiss is hot and hard and completely out of our control. Need streaks down my spine as he takes my... Nope. At this point, it is pretty clear Vi wants Xaden. He's asking if she really wants this, but she loves him desperately. Wants him desperately. So they unleash. They let their dirty little animal instincts take over, and the poor furniture around them takes a beating. In fact, their ability to freaking behave themselves isn't the only thing they lost control of, but their powers as well. Vi loses grip on her lightning, and Zaid lets go of his darkness. I've got you, Violet, he promises. His breath ragged pants against my lips. Let it out. Lightning whips through me, flashing so bright that my eyes slam shut. Heat flares above me as thunder cracks immediately, and I smell smoke. Xaden's power fills the room, eclipsing what light we had, and the curtain falls. But we're moving before the charred fabric so much as touched my skin. This is the beauty of romantasy right here. Not only are the characters doing the dirty, but they're doing the dirty with superpowers. The armoire is obliterated. The curtains aflame, windows smashes open, lightning pouring out of the sky outside. Now on paper, seems kinda hot, but logistically inconvenient. What if you're living in a studio apartment? At that rate, the studio isn't gonna have walls pretty soon. Pretty soon, you're gonna be living in a tent in the backyard. And then if you're trying to get some bing bong in the tent, that tent's catching on fire. I just don't think it's really gonna end up being a great situation. I'm gonna rate the spicy scene 5 out of 5 for over-the-top spice levels, but a 1 out of 5 for having to pay for constant household repairs. Fourth Ring is a visceral and fun time. For me, I wouldn't say it's anything mind-blowing. I think it holds a lot of tried and true tropes, but builds them together in an effective way. So I don't think it does anything particularly new, but what it does well. It's got some fun character dynamics, a cool dragon magic system, and some solid pacing. Like I mentioned earlier, there's just a kind of addictive quality to it. I do think that Iron Flame definitely has the potential to make that jump in quality and stakes in the same way that ACOTAR did when it leveled up in ACOMAF. And then I have to say that the part that just made me sob uncontrollably was just the part when, whoa, slow down there. X Games 8 here to say, thank you so much, everybody, for watching my rat tape. Letting me know if I should read Iron Flame, or if I should whip some crazy 360 varials. It's up to you. Hey, if you enjoyed my tape and maybe feel, inspired to start skating, be sure to like the video. And if you want to follow me on my journey to train for the X Games, be sure to subscribe.